Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today we've got a very different episode. It's more of a panel interview, panel discussion in honour of International Women's Day. And I have three fine ladies who are going to share their thoughts on women in leadership, the challenges and some of the sort of, I guess, hacks of how they've managed to navigate that whole aspect of being a woman in leadership. I've got Tracy, I've got Julie, and I've got Rebecca on the show, and I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Tracy. If you could introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Tracy Aust, and I am CEO and Principal of West Thames College, and I've been in this role now for 7 years.
Brilliant, thank you. Welcome to the show. And Julie.
Hello, I'm Julie Kapsalis, and I'm Acting Principal and Chief Exec of North East Surrey College of Technology.
Brilliant, welcome, Julie. And finally, Rebecca.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Conroy, and I'm Principal and Chief Exec at East Sussex College, based in Eastbourne, Hastings and Lewes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome. So you've all sort of managed to navigate and become sort of, I guess, women in leadership, and that's been a journey for you. And it'd be good to share some of your wisdom in helping other people who are looking to sort of, I guess, grow in leadership in the context of what you've done. And so I'm going to ask Julie first. What motivated you to, I guess, become a CEO, and what were the sort of barriers and challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome that? I know 3 questions in one there, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I don't think it was an explicit that I sat down one day and had a cunning plan that I wanted to be a CEO as I stroked my cat in a Machiavellian kind of way. I think it was points during my career where I recognised, or where I was frustrated with how things were going, where I recognised if I was able to move into a position of management or leadership, that I might be able to take a project or an organisation in a different way. And I think from there, you sort of begin to move up the ladder, and then sort of suddenly that position of a chief exec role is suddenly a bit closer than you'd ever thought. For me, barriers a huge thing, and it's something we may touch on later. The whole imposter syndrome, really key for me. Another kind of driver, if I'm totally honest, that's always nagged there was, if I go back to my time at school, I was never a particularly high achiever. And, I think if you read some of my school reports, I don't think they sort of had the view I'd amount to very much. And that sort of drove me to kind of prove people wrong that doubted me or that thought I couldn't achieve things. So a little bit of that has driven me. But actually, it's less the job title. It's more when you find yourself in a position, particularly working in education, where you can make a difference to people's lives through education. That's a really privileged position to be in. And I think that's what's driven me, the opportunity to change people's lives through learning.
Fantastic. I mean, obviously becoming a leader per se anyway is quite challenging, and what leadership is about is it's a challenging role. So you need to be challenged on the way up in terms of how you progress. It'd be interesting to see, Rebecca, what have you found as from a woman's perspective? I'm a man, as obviously, and I've probably not faced the challenges that you have faced in your career. And it just be has it been quite obviously that you've been sidelined because you're a woman?
It's a really interesting question, because I think I have sought opportunities, have been given opportunities sometimes by men, actually, and early on in my career had a couple of really key role models and mentors who gave me opportunities and really, I suppose, pushed me to take them and really supported me and gave me a lot of belief and really a lot of, they put a lot of faith in me, which was really beneficial and helped me grow and develop. Yes, there have definitely been barriers. I got very used to being underestimated, and I decided quite early on that was someone else's problem, and actually not for me to really react too violently to. Just keep doing what I'm doing, have faith in what I'm doing, and actually not not seek to adapt myself too much. I think we all adapt ourselves naturally, and as leaders, we have to take on different personas at different times to suit different times and places and moments. But actually, to feel quite confident in being myself and doing things my way, and quite determined, and probably a silk glove with quite a rod of iron there, really, just to sort of think, well, I'll do it my way, and I know, you could, well, wait and see, and there was a sort of, I suppose, probably quite irritating confidence about me, that I would really urge other people, not necessarily just women, but I think there is I think you have to be quite sure of yourself in leadership, and open to knowing when you need to learn, and open to being clear about when you don't know something, and be happy to be vulnerable as well. I think that's really important.
And Julie, you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I'd like and Tracy, you nodded there. I'd be interested to see your thoughts on that, and has that been an internal battle for you? And just explain, have you experienced that, and how have you overcome that in your sort of journey of leadership? That was to you, Tracy. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. I mean, in terms of imposter syndrome, absolutely. I think, when I was thinking about obstacles and barriers, I think some of those obstacles and barriers are ones that we put up ourselves, and that's about wanting to be the best we can be. And I think that imposter syndrome is definitely something that I would say I've experienced. And when I talk to others, it's kind of reassuring, I guess, to some extent, that that's how others feel, but also it's a concern that that's how we feel. And just to give you an example, I would look at something like a job description, and I would go, okay, so I might be able to do 95% of that, but that 5%, well, I don't think I should apply it. That 5% is going to be the thing that means that I can't do a job. And I think having that self-belief is a really important aspect. And as I say, I think imposter syndrome is there, and I think it's one of the biggest barriers internally. And I don't know that, I don't know that you ever really fully get over that, because I think every time you take on a new challenge or a new opportunity, whichever way you perceive it, there is still a bit of that in there. And I have to say, I'm always quite surprised by how many people actually say that's how they feel. And, when we talk about kind of gender differences, I think there are some things that, I'm not sure it's down to gender, but actually, if I take that same example around job descriptions, I know there are male colleagues who will have picked that up and go, well, do you know what? I could do 50% of that. Of course, I'm going to give it a go. So I think it's a very real thing, and I think it is a barrier for women. And I do think it's something that the more you talk about and understand that, and actually understand what is possible and possible solutions and options coming out of that, because it really shouldn't be the barrier that I think, certainly speaking for myself, I made it become.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, imposter syndrome, I think it can be a really healthy thing, because it means you're putting yourself outside your comfort zone, and it's a sign, I think, and it's just reframing it, that actually you're doing something that slightly requires you to grow. But I take your point on the whole job advert. A bloke will probably be 2 out of the 10 things and think, yeah, I can do that. Interesting, isn't it? How and the wife, my wife would say the same. I need to have 9 or 10 of them out to actually apply. So, Rebecca, I'd like to understand from your perspective, where do you think that's come from, that sense of lack of self-confidence, lack of self-belief, that, a woman would say, I need to have 95% versus a man, it's less than 50%?
Yeah, that's a massive question. I think there's a social structure that we're all very aware of that potentially doesn't help us. There's, there are far too few women in leadership positions, therefore few role models for us all to sort of look up to and learn from. And I think potentially a sort of a perhaps a stereotype of leaders as being quite, I suppose, the traits being traditionally quite sort of male dominated, whether they're male or females occupying those posts. So I think there's and I hope it's changing. I think that there is a tide of confident young women coming through. I look at my daughter and I can't imagine her ever thinking she's going to be an imposter. My goodness, she's quite fearsome, and that's really that is something that as educators we've got a real role to play in trying to break that down and building the confidence of women, and actually being quite open in saying exactly as we've described. Don't look at a job description and decide you can't do it. Look at what you can do and be bold and jump and leap and and really push yourself forward. And that I really hope that as I say, that things are changing, but we can't be complacent, because it's certainly it's there. And the more we talk about it, the more we support each other. Female networks are so powerful, and actually female networks that also include male feminists as well. That's really important. We've got to work together to make sure that we're collectively we're challenging and supporting each other to progress and thrive and grow and learn and all those wonderful things.
Rebecca, you mentioned role models there, and Julie, I'd like to get your thoughts on role models, because I look at you three and you're great role models for leadership, also for women in leadership. And so Julie, what is the importance to you of role models, and who have been your role models as you've sort of gone on your journey of leadership?
Yeah, hugely important. And some role models are sort of those unattainable, or maybe I shouldn't be saying unattainable, maybe that's my imposter syndrome, but those figures, for me, a big one is Michelle Obama. And something I always channel, if I'm in a difficult situation, is that brilliant line from her about when they go low, you go high. And that's something I use quite a lot. But actually, for me, some of the most important role models are people I work with every day. And we were just talking about the power of networks. I was lucky enough 2 years ago to be invited on a course for leaders within further education. And I had the imposter syndrome moment, in that I wasn't a chief exec at that stage. I was like, I'm going to be surrounded by people that know far more than I do, and I'll be out of my depth. And actually, it was that course 2 years ago where I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Rebecca and Tracy and a number of other really inspirational leaders from further education. And actually, it's that group of people, and there are about 8 of us that have stayed closely in touch, who I see as role models, who I often see as, actually in our case, it's not phone a friend, it's WhatsApp the group. And their advice, kindness, support, reciprocity is key to being able to do my job on a weekly basis. So I think it's important with role models that you have a balance of role models, those that sort of probably are facing some of the same challenges. It could be in a different sector, but to you, who can give you that advice, but also those aspirational ones.
Yeah, and role modeling is important. And I want to just ask, I'll come to you, Rebecca, in terms of how you become a role model yourself within your organization and the people around you, and what are your thoughts on how you develop leadership per se within your organization? What's your thoughts on that? What's your, I don't know, whether it's criteria, do you have biases to battle with, and do you promote more women because you're a woman? I don't know, just intrigued to understand that from your point of view, Rebecca.
So we've spoken before, Julian, about, I suppose, being a values-led leader, and I think it's easily said, but actually to try and live and breathe your values and support people and make the workplace whether it be a family-friendly workplace, promoting work-life balance, and really living and breathing that. So it's not these aren't just words. I think that's how you behave and live. And I think by doing that, you are, I hope I am, a role model to other leaders and managers within the college, and therefore, you know, for our students, that's what we do. So I think there is something about understanding your responsibility as a leader. And I use the analogy often of a football player, one of our wonderful female football players at the moment. But actually, as a leader, the strength of your kit is actually quite strong. So really, really use that carefully. You know, if you're passing a ball and you tap it, probably that ball's going to boot because you've got a lot of, you know, you've got a lot of power and influence. So actually understanding that, tapping the foot, tapping the ball. Let's be, you know, just you know, everything you do needs to be calm, and therefore you will get the best out of people. So I think that's, you know, this is just an example of sort of a style and approach that I hope then sets a tone within an organisation, and helps that organisation become perhaps a kinder one, you know, a more caring one, if you're exhibiting those values. I think that's a really important sort of principle. Am I living and breathing? Am I behaving in a way that I want other people to behave, and pass that down? You know, and if we're not, let's challenge each other and let's understand why we're not, and let's go back to basics on values. And we do that quite a lot. It's a journey, but we do that quite a lot. And we're getting some quite positive feedback about the culture, and there's always more to do. But I think that sense of making sure it's a place that I would have wanted to work in earlier in my career. Would I have seen opportunity for myself? And we can always do more, but I think that those principles are really important.
Yeah, and I think having those principles and values means you're approaching it from a more centered point of view, in terms of, rather than thinking, oh, we need to have so many females here, so many males, or whatever it is, and diversity. And Trace, I'd like to just get your thoughts on that whole, I call it sort of tick box sort of scenarioing, where people just tick boxes for, you know, board reports, and we have, you know, women of color, we have women, and all that type of thing. And I know why we have to push for targets and to try and create things, but for me, it's more about creating a behavioral change and cultural change in organization. What's your thoughts on that in terms of how you promote that sort of gender and sort of diversity within your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this will actually resonate with what Rebecca has just said. But for us as an organisation, and my role as a leader, the whole piece around diversity and inclusion it's a piece that's across the board, and it's difficult to disentangle it in one particular area. So for us, one of our underpinning values is around equality, and that's kind of in all aspects of the workplace. And there might be very specific things in there, whether it's about a flexible working policy, you know, accommodating where possible, you know, different start times, end times. And we see that certainly within my organisation, working at a local level. And I think where you have examples like that, what it does, you know, myself, I will have used that, but also it opens up those opportunities to other people to say, actually, this is possible. There are opportunities here that I may not have considered. So the whole piece around kind of the right person in the right role is important, but I think the kind of equity around that is equally important, as is the approach to it. And I think that touches upon the piece that Rebecca has already said around the kind of values, principles, and the culture. And certainly one of the things from an organisational point of view we've really tried to do is look at things like succession planning. And we've got lots of really good examples of people who've moved into kind of senior posts across the organisation that act as really good, positive role models. And one of the things, again, touching upon something Julie said that I think is important, actually, in the roles that we've got, it's, yes, there's the role modelling for our staff, but actually equally important, it's our students. They are the next generation. And I think our students seeing, you know, those positive role models is a really important part of their journey too, and hopefully opening up opportunities that they may not have considered. And I guess just the kind of final piece on this from me is that one of the other things we've been really keen to do is to look at leaders and female leaders, and what does a leader look like? And sometimes there is, I guess, a myth that leaders are people at the top of the organisation and that you don't have them spread throughout. So one of the things that we've developed is a programme, what does an outstanding leader look like at West Thames College? And actually it's about recognising those individuals at all levels of the organisation. And I think that's how you help to create that equity, that diversity, because it's starting at different levels and allowing people opportunities, whether that's career progression, developing new skills. So I think there's a whole range of things, a package of things that sit together within an organisation. And I think being in the fortunate position, that the three of us are in, we are able to influence, persuade and steer. But I think you can do that in part because of the approach that you take to it in terms of bringing people in, getting people's buy-in.
Thank you, Tracy. And you touched on about leadership, and there's different styles of leadership, in terms of, servant leadership, autocratic leadership. Julia, I'd like to get your thoughts on, is there a style that from a woman versus a man, is there a different style, do you think, that comes from your experience, from yourself? And what are the benefits for that style, if there is a difference from your perspective, within an organization having a woman in leadership?
It's interesting. I think in the last 10 years, I'm seeing sort of fewer really distinct differences. And like Rebecca reflected, actually, some of the people who have encouraged and supported and given me the most opportunities have been men, probably actually more than women, actually, if I reflect on it. And I think it can be a bit dangerous sometimes to generalize and say there's a significant difference in style. But I think I'd probably rather answer that by what style of leadership do I think supports women or supports a more diverse leadership base. And I think it's about authenticity. And I think it's about being adaptive, which I think builds on what Tracy was saying as well. For many years when my children were very young, I sort of had this kind of view that I almost, didn't ever want my world as a parent to cross with that, in terms of work, because people would judge me, is she leaving early because of this? Or, and actually it took working for somebody that absolutely had the view, family comes first. You should never, be ashamed to say I'm leaving early because it's sports day or it's, Christmas play. And in fact, you should celebrate it and be talking about it, because there'll be other people in the organisation that will be sat there thinking, I'd love to leave an hour early today to do this. And actually, there's always ways you can support people to do that. So for me, that level of authenticity is important, but also to be adaptive in your style. When you're managing a lot of people directly and even more indirectly, my style and way of doing things won't always be the same as other people's, and it's finding that ground. An example I would give is the hours I work are sometimes a little bit odd because it fits in around my family, so I will often work very late at night and at weekends, and that suits me. I work better then, but it doesn't mean I ever expect anybody to reply at that time. And equally, good luck if you send me an email at 7 o'clock in the morning, because you won't get a reply from me. So I think it's about communicating that so people understand your expectations and why you do that. So I think probably, adaptive and authentic would be for me.
And that's relevant whether you're male or female, isn't it? It doesn't matter. And this is it's interesting, isn't it? It's tapping into something that actually, let's stop almost putting people into boxes. Yes, we're of certain genders. I appreciate that, and all that's even getting more blurred anyway. But actually, just seeing people for who they really are, what talent they bring, how they bring it, as long as they're doing it authentically, that's all that matters. And does that fit the criteria for whatever the role this post is for? then that's it. It's difficult though, because obviously people do carry biases with them. You know, somebody walks into the room, whether they are female, the white, black, whatever it may be, there's a bias. And I'm just from Rebecca, from your point of view, how have you challenged yourself on that when you've either been interviewing people from senior posts, and what are your thoughts on that, and how do you, I guess, tap into that and that unconscious bias, I guess, that we all have?
We all have, yeah. And I think the first step is recognizing you have. So whatever we do and say, and in our organizations, I think recognizing all sorts of biases, prejudices, areas of behavior that really we need to tackle. The first thing is to recognize it, acknowledge it, and challenge yourself. And I think, let's take interviewing or recruitment. Actually, first of all, making sure that you've got a panel that is made up of a diverse panel as far as is possible, and that you do challenge each other on making sure that what you're assessing is genuinely someone's experience, someone's approach, and that you are really able to say, I think we're perhaps, I think we're judging that person because of a particular, maybe it's an accent, or maybe, whatever it might be, and being able to transcend, I suppose, perhaps some, all those biases where you can, and look to that person and what are they going to bring. And you asked at the beginning of the podcast about whether, there's always a danger that you recruit the people that you feel either are most like you, or they're perhaps most like your best friend, or whatever it is, and we're drawn to certain traits. And actually, a leadership team made up of people with very different skills, very different approaches, can be so healthy for an organization. But the most fundamental part of that is that you're able to communicate, trust each other, and understand each other's differences, and move through them. There will, and not be afraid of a bit of conflict. But if that's respectful conflict, you're going to, hopefully the decision or the outcome will be better because of it.
Yeah. And so is it more Rebecca? Is that?
No, that's sorry. Yeah.
Can I share a Rebecca moment? Rebecca will know this. So before I'd even met Rebecca, our colleges at the time were quite close to each other and a bit rivals. And I walked into this meeting room, and we were both there. And I'm really ashamed of this. And I learned from it when I reflected it. I kind of sat down and I wanted to scowl at you a bit, Rebecca. And you just smiled. And that one thing in doing that just made me smile as well. And then I think, by the end of that day, we were possibly drinking a glass of wine together, possibly not, and talking about how we could collaborate. But I had not intentionally just sort of fallen into a trap of, we were rivals, and I learned a lot from you that day in that reaction. That warmth in that you showed to me made me kind of think, I've got a bit of an unconscious bias that I wasn't aware of. And I learned a lot from that small moment.
Oh, thank you. A smile is a brilliant thing. I learnt that from my mother, who has the most amazing megawatt smile, and I probably grew up watching her diffuse almost anything. Not that we needed to diffuse anything, Julie, but that sense of just being open and friendly, and here we are. What could happen here? And I love the word, collaborative. And I think that, picking up on the question about perhaps different leadership traits, actually, and it's not just a female trait, but that sense of, let's work together. This sector's tough enough, whether we're neighbouring colleges or not. What can we learn from each other? How can we help each other? Really, really important. And a trait, as I say, it must transcend gender, because it's so important. But the more we do it, and the more we learn and grow, the stronger the sector becomes. And actually, we stop becoming an animal that eats itself in any kind of sector or industry, and help each other. It's got to be the way forward.
Completely agree on the collaboration front, and I think it's become a kind of an ever-growing area. And I don't know how it's been, for the areas that both of you are in. I mean, geographically, but certainly I know from my own experience that collaborative piece has become much more central and core to what we are doing. And you're absolutely right, Rebecca, it isn't a trait attached to a gender. It's much more widespread than that. And in order to really make a difference, that collaboration piece is absolutely essential, and not just within our sector, but it's when it starts extending out, so incorporating employers, partners, other stakeholders. But the power of that, I think, is huge. And in some ways, I see some of that a bit like the networking piece, what you can do through networking and together, the thing about the sum of your parts being greater than the individual. I think the collaboration piece in many ways actually has some real parallels with networking.
I really like Julie, when you honestly shared your bias with Rebecca but then learned from it. And I think it's that being aware, isn't it? We will have biases, which is okay. It's fine. It's just what we've been experienced in our lives. But then, Rebecca said about how that diversity, when you're interviewing people, have a diverse board, not that just it tick box. Actually, having a diverse board means you'll get different perspectives. Different biases will really help you problem solve and create innovation and ways forward as well. And also keep yourself in check when somebody sort of cuts across your bias that you didn't realize you had, because they've sort of shone a light on it in terms of what they've said. So I think that's really, really helpful. I'd like to just sort of explore just a few thoughts. Perhaps, I don't know, Tracy, want to share the challenges from a family thing. Julie, you touched on about how you manage your family. And this is, I'm not assuming you are the main family person, as it were, and I'm not assuming that, but just how you manage the whole family piece working and how that works. And it can be challenging in that. I just wonder, Tracy, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think for me, from the very outset, one of the things that I've always done is put in place some parameters, and I've always been really clear with those. So some structures and some organisation, and that really helps me, but also helps from a family point of view and from a work point of view. So the organisation piece definitely helped. And from the very outset, when I've been thinking about next steps in my career, I've had those very open conversations with my husband about how this was going to work and how we were going to be equal partners in this. But I also then communicated that with my children and also back in the workplace. So just to give you an example, with work, I would say when I came back from maternity leave, I will be leaving at this point in time. I was very open with people. This is what you can expect. In these hours, I will not be available. 6 till 8, I will be with the boys. That will be their time. I will communicate and get back to you afterwards. And so I've made it very clear, I think, what the expectations were and how I was going to work. And actually, I think by doing that, that really helped others as well, thinking actually that's okay. We can do that and you can make it work. So I think you have to be open with what you're doing and recognize that things might need to be done differently, and that there is some flexibility. And I think that goes for both, that's male, female. So for me, it was about putting those parameters in place. And also then from my children's point of view, they were also very clear, this is my time, this is when, we've got things to do as a family. So there was a time in the evenings. And then we carved out time at weekends, Sundays. As a family, we all did rugby. So I coached one team that my son played in. My husband coached the other team that my other son played in. And that was family time. It's things that we did together. So I think having those structures in place really helped me to kind of manage that balance, because what I wasn't prepared to do was to compromise on my family for the sake of my role. But equally, I didn't want to commit myself to a job that I couldn't give 100% to. I would rather not do it in the first place. And yes, with best laid plans, there are always times that would, you would deviate from that. And that's okay, to know that happens. And to kind of to reflect on that, to learn from that. But there'll be times my children, for example, might go, "Mum, are you on your phone?" And it was at a particular point in time, and I'd have to check myself. Actually, sorry, do you know what? That can go to one side. That's not the kind of focus for right now. So I think the getting that balance right is important. And I think that balance looks different for different people. And I would certainly, say to people, what does it look like for you, and what needs to be in place in order for you to achieve that? What needs to be in place, I guess, from a personal point of view, and also what do you need to see from a workplace point of view to make those two things come together and make it doable. And I do also think that other people seeing that you're able to create that balance, I really hope gives other people some motivation to say, actually, do you know what? If that person can do it, then actually maybe I can. Maybe there is a chance for me to do it. So I really hope that, again, it's part of that role modeling. But I do think there is also a point in your life at which, your priorities might be in a particular place. So I know for me, when I was thinking about roles, actually I got to a point where I thought, yeah, my children are of a particular age. Now I feel like I can commit. Putting those structures in place made it possible, where there might have been other points where I thought, you know what, the timing is just not right for me at this point in time. It doesn't mean never, but it does mean 12 months down the line, that's what I'm going to look to do.
And I think society and organizations have got far more flexible now in terms of managing that sort of family, and it's seen as a positive, be transparent, being open, and allowing people to, male or female, to go off early and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's, but I think there's still the pressure there. And I think the roles you all play, you're quite pivotal in terms of decision making. You're quite, you have to be present at certain things, and that can put some pressure on, can't it, in terms of events. Certain events, you probably have to be the one heading it up because you are the CEO, and therefore there's no other option for you to be there. And that can be a sacrifice in some ways of, opportunities with your family and events and Christmas plays and all that sort of stuff. Just before we finish, I'd love to get each one of you just to share, I guess, if you're going to give one piece of advice to sort of budding female leaders or female to be aspiring leaders, what would be your one advice? And I'll start with Julie, if you're okay to jump in on that, and then go with Tracy, and then finish with you, Rebecca.
Well, as you know, I like breaking rules, so I'm going to have two. First is to find a really good mentor to support you. And I also passionately believe in reverse mentoring. And you will find that, you learn both ways in a strong mentoring relationship. I've learned more from my reverse mentee than I think she'd ever learn from me. But the second, which builds on that, is to build your network of people. It's tough sometimes, being in a leadership role, really tough. And having those people that you can reach out to, whether it's a shoulder to cry on, whether it's a piece of advice, whether it's just being able to find, something crazy that happened at the weekend that you can just laugh about, that's nothing to do with work. Having that group of trusted people, really trusted people that you can share those things with, is key at every step along the way, because there's always difficult decisions to be made. Is it the right time for me? Should I put my hat in the ring? So that network of people, find them, build them, and support them, because they will support you too. Thank you, Julie. Tracy?
Yeah, I would say if it's something you're passionate about and motivated by, then go for it. Yes, there may be pitfalls along the way, but we learn from these. And I think these are the things that make us stronger, and in my opinion, I think better leaders. And I'd also say, stay true to yourself. Yes, we have adaptive leadership and there are things that you need to change, but don't fundamentally change who you are. Being authentic is so powerful. And then I think finally the piece for me would just be honest, and don't underestimate the importance of good communication. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because we never stop learning, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's what makes us grow, and it's how we continue to achieve and to be successful. So, put that imposter syndrome to one side. You know in yourself there is something, you've got an enthusiasm about it, I would say go for it, and thinking about all the support structures that Julie referred to that you put in place.
Thank you, Tracy. Rebecca?
Right, I've got to as well. We're breaking all the rules, Julian.
You're so rebellious. You really are.
I know,
so rebellious.
we really are. So, and in fact, you can almost say 3. But firstly, I think learn to say yes and to say no. So say yes to opportunity. Say yes when perhaps you're feeling a little bit jumpy about something, but say yes to things that are going to give you opportunities and that you'll grow from and learn from, and just do it. The lead-in sort of model. But also learn to say no. And Tracy mentioned boundaries, but have your boundaries and be really clear on what you will and won't do, and practice that. And whether you use the word no or whether you practice some other language that feels more comfortable, but be really clear on what you will and won't do. And finally, look after yourself, because we've described at various points working all hours, fitting things round, and putting all and actually, I think the sort of the superwoman that can do it all. Yes, I'm sure we've all been those people at times, but you will burn out if you're not careful. Put your, make sure you've got time for yourself. I like a little bit of roller skating now and again. Make sure you build in time for the things that you love and that are going to make you feel yourself. And then it's the sort of the put your what's it called, your oxygen mask on. Then you're able then to support others. And I think those 3 pieces. If somebody had said that to me maybe 15 years ago, I hope I would have really taken that on board and might have avoided a little bit of burnout along the way. But that's certainly what I do now.
Excellent. All good advice. And I just want to just say thank you for coming on this episode and sharing your wisdom, your thoughts, the challenges you face and how you've overcome them. And I think there's stacks in that. And we probably could carry on for a number of hours talking about this, I'm sure. But so thank you, Julie. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Rebecca. Really appreciated you coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Thanks.